Forget PSG, Bayern, forget Arsenal, Man City, forget Chelsea, Dortmund. This is the best game of this week, and it is a must not miss. Hello and welcome to UELtras here on Ranks FC, back for the sharp end of Europe's two most exciting and varied club competitions, the Europa Twins of the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. I'm Jack Collins, and today we're looking at the must-watch ties across these two competitions. There is a plethora of wonderful games that you can choose from, but we're going to start in the Europa League and with a game that was a previous Champions League final. Well, the two teams who met in that 2011 Champions League final and 2009, don't forget, they meet again in a Europa League playoff round. Guarantee you that nobody was expecting that a decade ago, but here we are. And with that said, there have been times in recent seasons where both of these have found themselves in the Europa League due to the fact that they've been at a low ebb. But now it feels like these are very much two teams on the up, or back on the up. Erik ten Hag has Manchester United fans feeling like the good times returning is just around the corner, whilst Xavi's Blaugrana are 11 points clear at the top of La Liga and look like a side back in Europe's elite tier. Look, nobody could doubt that it looks like a Champions League tie in terms of names, but I think it also feels like one in terms of form. United have lost just once in their last 14 games. That was a 3-2 reverse away at table-topping Arsenal, whilst Barcelona are unbeaten in 16. So two teams on startling streaks, but where is it won and lost? As ever, in these big matchups, the midfield battle looked like it's going to be absolutely crucial. Christian Eriksen's injury in January was swiftly rectified by the club with the addition of Marcel Sabitzer on deadline day. But he's suspended for this one. He picked up 3 yellow cards in Bayern's group stages in the Champions League. That carries over into the Europa League. It denies us that first opportunity of seeing Sabitzer line up with Casemiro in the United midfield, but perhaps a more pragmatic duo, Brazil's finest, Casemiro and Fred, will actually here be necessary in order to kind of combat Barcelona's frightening midfield talent. Catalan captain Sergio Busquets is missing as well through injury, so we're likely to see more of Xavi's slightly unconventional midfield shape here. Much was made of this being the Frenkie de Jong derby when the draw was made. United obviously made no secret of their desire to sign the Dutchman over the summer. He worked with Erik ten Hag at Ajax. No move materialised, however, and I think Frenkie is playing some of the best football we've ever seen from him. Certainly the best football we've seen from him at Barcelona at the moment. And part of this is the players around him, Gavi, Pedri, and then there's a fourth midfielder, which will probably be Franck Kessié here. They play in this sort of lopsided square. Gavi's nominally on the left wing, but he tucks back inside to box off the middle. And what it allows is for Frenkie to have that freedom to roam, to pick the ball up from his centre-backs and drive forward, to put Barcelona on the front foot. He's been magnificent of late, seeing some of the tendencies that made him one of the most sought-after midfielders in the world when he left Ajax. The other key battle for me comes down United's left flank. Marcus Rashford is in absolutely scintillating form, and he remains the foremost attacking threat for the Red Devils. In earlier games this season, though, against Real Madrid, Xavi deployed Ronald Araujo on the right side of his defence in order to combat the ability and the incredible skill of Vinicius Jr., which he actually did incredibly successfully. The one game that Real Madrid won against Barcelona this season, Ronald Araujo was missing. Make of that what you will. The question, I suppose, is actually here whether he sticks to what has been happening lately, which has been Jules Koundé on the right-hand side and Araujo inside him at right centre-back, or he switches them around in order to try and directly combat that Rashford threat, because Araujo has been absolutely colossal in the centre of Barcelona's defence of late. I imagine they'll maybe start with Koundé on the right and then switch them round if Rashford starts to get joy down that flank. Look, Barca's Culés were deeply unhappy at the exit in the Champions League. You do have to consider the fact that last year in the Europa League, it didn't really feel like it made that much difference for them. And Barcelona were probably favourites going into the playoff round last season to go and win the competition. They were turned over by Eintracht Frankfurt at the Camp Nou. And actually what happened was there were just loads of Eintracht fans everywhere. It turns out Barcelona fans had been selling their seats. The club hadn't been paying too much attention. But I was speaking to the Athletics' Paul Bayus earlier this week, and he assured me that the magnitude of this fixture means that there is genuine excitement around the town in Barcelona at the moment with this fixture coming up. It's going to be a packed, crackling Camp Nou that United find themselves in. One, excited about seeing how their new generation and a very successful generation so far this season compare, coming up against a European giant back on the up after some fallow years. Forget PSG versus Bayern, forget Arsenal versus Manchester City, forget Dortmund versus Chelsea. This is the best game happening this week, and it is a must not miss. Ajax are 11 games unbeaten and just 3 points off the Eredivisie summit. But don't let that fool you into believing that this season has been anything but an absolute roller coaster of emotions for the Ajax faithful. Following Ten Hag's move to Manchester United this summer, things have been mostly on a downward trajectory. Former assistant Alfred Schreuder took the top job, but he was removed from his post a few weeks ago due to disappointing results and a lack of progression, I quote. Schreuder struggled, but slightly in his defence. He had a major hole in the squad. From last season's team, Nusayr Mazraoui and Ryan Gravenberch headed off to Bayern Munich, Sebastian Haller to their great Klassiker rivals Borussia Dortmund, Lissandro Martinez and Anthony went to join Ten Hag at Old Trafford, and Nicolas Tagliafico ran down his contract and headed off to Lyon. Schreuder didn't help himself either, though. He had a bizarre U-turn on his starting goalkeeper right at the start of the season and a major public falling out with vice-captain and beloved homegrown son of the club, Daley Blind. He's now left for Bayern Munich as well. Former player and young Ajax coach Johnny Heitinger was pressed into action in the hot seat, and so far, so good. Ajax have won 4 of 4 under his stewardship, knocked high-flying Twente out of the cup and scored 13 goals in the process. Mostly though, Ajax just look far more dangerous. Dusan Tadic is back in as a false 9. Mo Kudus looks really sharp from that right flank. Berghuis is getting forward from midfield again, and Owen Wijndal is providing far more from left back than Calvin Bassey ever did, which is not really a dig at Bassey, he's just a converted centre half. Over at Union, as Sam mentioned on the podcast, things have been far better after the international break than they did before it. This was a squad that looked absolutely exhausted in early November. A team that had boasted the best defensive record in the Bundesliga at the start of that month collapsed to back-to-back 5-0 and 4-1 hammerings away to Leverkusen and Freiburg. But they look refreshed, reinvigorated after that breather. 6 straight wins, crowned on Saturday with a 2-1 toppling of Leipzig away from home. One that the fans in particular, fiercely proud of their anti-corporate punk rock-esque ethos, will have really enjoyed. It leaves Union just 1 point off Bayern at the Bundesliga summit and eyeing up one of the most unlikely title charges that we've seen in years, especially in Germany. This is a side that know how to dig in, defend well and see things through. They're different to the end-to-end chaos that envelops much of that league. New signing Aysel Aydouni, fresh off impressing for Tunisia at the World Cup, has slotted nicely into midfield. And Josip Juranovic, signed from Celtic to replace Dortmund-bound Julian Ryerson, has done very much the same. But the big change since the break has been up front. The dynamic duo of Geraldo Becker and Jordan has been changed. Becker has kept his place, but Jordan has suddenly found himself behind Kevin Behrens in the pecking order. The veteran German came in for the Werder Bremen game, has 2 goals in his last 4 starts. Whether Jordan comes back into the side here with any Europa League rotation is up for debate. 2 sides then with new leases of life since January, and in what promises to be an electric atmosphere in Amsterdam, I can see this one being nicely poised as they head into the second leg over at Berlin. This just feels very Europa League, doesn't it? Although I'm sure fans of both clubs would point me to the fact that they've reached a Champions League final since the turn of the millennium. I meant that, though, in the most positive possible way. This is UELtras after all. I think it has the potential to be up there with the most entertaining ties of this round. Leverkusen looked in dire straits earlier in the season before turning to Xabi Alonso to steady the ship, which he has done, albeit not without some hiccups on the way. 6 league wins in his last 8, though, suggest that they are very much on the right track. Alonso's team is a nice blend of youth and experience, with a host of crown jewels to boast. Florian Wirtz, one of the most exciting young German prospects in years, alongside Jamal Musiala, of course, is back to fitness and back in this starting 11. Jeremy Frimpong has been given a new lease of life at wingback. He's in absolutely flying form. And Piero Hincapié gives a confidence and assurance at centre-back that belies his tender years. Moussa Diaby has been a long-term target for a host of Premier League clubs, and although he's a little bit mercurial in terms of his finishing, his searing pace and that intelligence to get off the shoulder of the last defender makes him an absolute menace, whilst Adam Hlozek alongside him is finally starting to show a little bit of his worth since getting that Bundesliga move in the summer. The two of them will play as inside forwards, wingers on paper that move inside and get in behind, as Wirtz drops deeper to orchestrate play. And it's a strategy that was utilised in fine style in their 3-1 win at Hoffenheim this weekend. Frimpong screaming down the right as the two of them darted inside and caused havoc in the opposition box, both on the score sheet. Monaco come to town in fine fettle themselves, though, fresh of a 3-1 win over PSG at the weekend, in a game where they didn't have all that much of the ball, but they created far more chances, far better chances, and I thought were the far better side overall. Youssouf Fofana and Mohamed Kamara were immense in the middle of the park, and as a pairing, they provide the platform for so much of what Monaco tried to do. Up front, the evergreen Wissam Ben Yedder is still doing what he does best: scoring goals for fun. 19 in 28 games in all competitions this season. But he's flanked at the moment not by his trusty sidekick Kevin Volland, who has returned from an injury, or by Swiss speedster Breel Mbolo, but by young sensation Elias Ben Seguir, who has burst onto the scene at just 17 years old and complements his compatriot beautifully. 2 attacks then full of life and vigour, 2 sides in good form. This one promises goals, and it's potentially the pick of the late games in the Europa League if you're looking to see a young generation of talents earning their spurs. Sevilla are the kings of this competition, winning it 6 times across its 2 guises, and the last time they were knocked out at this stage was back in 2010-2011, where they lost on away goals to a Porto side who went on to lift the title. That proud record is in severe danger here, though. The red side of Seville is having a rough ride this season, and despite 3 wins in the last 5, dragging them away from the relegation battle they look to be embroiled in into mid-table, all is not completely fixed at the Sanchez Pizjuan. They've won just 6 games all season in the league, scoring just 23 goals in 21 games. But that said, the reappointment of Jorge Sampaoli has done something to stabilise the club, and they've done something that they had been unable to do earlier in their campaign: win games against teams that they should be beating. I'm sure people will point out that Sevilla have won 8 of their last 12, but it's worth considering those 8 teams: Velarde, Torremolinos, Linares and Alaves in the Copa del Rey, Getafe, Cadiz, Elche and Mallorca in the league. These are games that a squad of Sevilla's calibre should be coming out the right side of. And PSV are not going to roll over so easily. Since Ruud van Nistelrooy took over from Benfica-bound Roger Schmidt last summer, he's done pretty solidly. PSV might be 4th in the Eredivisie, but they're just 4 points off Feyenoord in top spot. Side note, the Eredivisie is probably the most exciting title race in Europe right now. But the recent transfer window hit the club hard. Leading lights Cody Gakpo and Noni Madueke left for Liverpool and Chelsea respectively, and with them much of PSV's creative juices. Torgan Hazard was brought in to provide a little bit of experience and craft in Gakpo's former left wing slot, whilst Belgian youngster Johan Bakayoko is starting to draw the eye on the right in Madueke's absence. With those 2 talismen gone, though, even more creative onus falls on the absurdly talented Xavi Simons, who has joined in the summer from Paris Saint-Germain and who's been outstanding for much of this league campaign. The 19-year-old has 13 goals and 6 assists in 31 games and has thrived playing before as a more kind of traditional number 10 behind veteran captain Luc de Jong. Van Nistelrooy has a young crop playing an open, exciting style, and after scoring 6 at the weekend against Groningen, they'll be smelling blood when they come to try and dethrone Sevilla at their own palace. Whatever happens, this should be an enthralling, high-tempo encounter. And with that, we head over to the Conference League. Braga versus Fiorentina was the headline tie of the Conference League's playoff round when it was announced back in November. And so it stands today, although the hosts are firm favourites to progress, given the form of these two sides. It will take place, though, in one of the most iconic stadiums on earth, one of my favourites, Braga's Estadio Municipal, which is commonly known as A Pedreira, the quarry, because of its incredibly unique location. Carved from the Monte Castro quarry just outside of Braga's city centre, it has just two stands, one on either side, and linked by metal wires stretching across, with a rock face behind one goal and a forest on the other. It truly is a ground like no other. And Braga have slowly built a team to match such a location. Currently third in the Primeira, they look like the side most likely to challenge the big three, have done over recent years, and they find themselves this time round 8 points clear of Sporting with 14 games remaining in this season. Having knocked table toppers Benfica out of the cup last week, the Conference League looks like another serious path for Braga to pick up some silverware this season. There are few teams remaining who can match their quality and cohesiveness across the second half of this campaign. With French striker Simon Banza and former Barcelona man Abel Ruiz leading the line, the Horta brothers of Andre and Ricardo supplying the ammunition, and veteran Pizzi joining in January to provide some experience. There's a host of talent in their prime across the park. This side has a little bit of everything, and they're a joy to watch in full flight. Their opponents, on the other hand, are stuttering. After an excellent first season under Vincenzo Italiano, which saw them finish 7th and get back into Europe for the first time since 2017, the difficult second season moniker has proved true to form, with La Viola currently 14th in Serie A and looking over their shoulder towards the relegation zone nervously, as much as looking to challenge for that 7th spot again. It looked like a good summer haul as well. Luka Jovic joined on a free from Real Madrid, has struggled to get fully going as the team's focal point, and the fact that he's leading scorer with 8 in 30 games tells you everything you need to know about this side. Artur Cabral came in last January to replace Dusan Vlahovic, but he hasn't been able to live up to the expectations of him as the out-and-out number 9, and generally the squad looks far weaker and less cohesive than it did last season. A decent Coppa Italia run is covering up some of the cracks for now, but there's plenty of work to be done if they're going to progress further in this one, especially with such a tricky tie to deal with in the playoff round. A caveat though, Fiorentina are not by any means a bad side. When they've lost, they've tended to do so by kind of a single goal here and there, but they're not yet good either, I would say. With that said, it's with backs against the wall that they performed best this year. A hard-fought 1-1 draw with Lazio, and it looked like they were going to be pulverised to every preview going. An impressive win over Sassuolo, who have looked like their old selves again in recent weeks following that, and an absolute demolition of hearts in the group stages of this one when their qualification was in doubt. Perhaps La Viola can pull off another win in a stadium as iconic as their resplendent purple shirts. This isn't the sexiest game of the day on paper, but there's plenty of political intrigue that surrounds it if you're into that kind of thing. You remember Sheriff, of course you do. Last season, they shocked Shakhtar Donetsk on the Champions League's opening day before beating Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, courtesy of a Sebi Till Thunderbolt. The dream faded away after that, but for the Moldovan champions, their name was on the map. On the other side of this one is Partizan Belgrade, one half of one of the world's most fiercely contested derbies, the eternal derby of Belgrade, contested against their great rivals, Red Star. They come into this as favourites, but the worldwide interest in this game comes from far darker, less on-pitch matters. Sheriff Tiraspol are nominally from Moldova, but their fans and their people probably wouldn't see it that way. That's because Sheriff is located in an unrecognised breakaway region of the world called Transnistria, which considers itself an independent state stuck in a frozen conflict after the fall of the Soviet Union, and one that called to join with Russia after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. The game was moved from Tiraspol to the Moldovan capital of Chisinau for security reasons, but there will now be no fans in attendance after Moldovan President Maia Sandu spoke of an alleged plot by Russia to overthrow her government, which is pro-European Union. Serbia has plenty of historical gripes with the EU, but also historically has had deep ties with the Russian people. Some of the Russian involvement in the two world wars was due to their ideals of pan-Slavism and their role as a guardian in that movement. But even in modern terms, there are cultural similarities and a friendship that exists in general terms between the two nations, although Serbia has politically condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. With all that said, fears for this game revolved around the idea that a Russian plot was being hatched to smuggle military personnel into the country under the guise of Partizan fans, a plot that Russia has outright denied as absolutely unfounded and unsubstantiated, I quote. Either way, there'll be no travelling fans with Partizan and no home fans from Sheriff in order to prevent anything from demonstration to riot going on in the first leg of this game in Moldova. It will make for a strange atmosphere, but it is a game rife with tension for all the wrong reasons. That's all for today on UELtras. What a Thursday night we have ahead of us. As ever, thank you so much for watching. Please share this with any other lovers of these two brilliant competitions, and I will see you next week for the second legs. Take it easy. Long live the UELtras. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe for more from us at Ranks FC.